It may be deep into the season and even playoff time already for some of you out there, but that doesn't mean that there aren't good players available on waivers, even in deep leagues. And by week 14, half of your league is probably already eliminated from contention, so there may be a better chance that you can pick up these players. I got to start out with a couple of players who just jumped onto the radar after strong performances on Monday Night Football. First, a reminder, if you check out Underdog Fantasy right now, you get to take advantage of this new customer special. For Week 14, Dak Prescott against the Eagles just needs 1 yard. Take the higher, zero point 0.5 total yards. That's right. You sign up now using promo code NGAME, and you not only get that free pick'em, you also get a 100% deposit match up to $100. So if you haven't tried it now, download the app, go to Underdog, or click the link in the description below. There might already be a lot of attention on Parker Washington of the Jacksonville Jaguars for a couple of reasons. First of all, Christian Kirk early in the game, his very first catch, suffered an injury. It's been called a core muscle injury, might require surgery, and it looks like he's done for the regular season. So stepping up in his place, it wasn't a big Calvin Ridley game, it wasn't Zay Jones, it was Parker Washington. You'd be excused if you didn't know who Parker Washington was. Not only was his first game that he actually did anything for fantasy, or really did anything at all, this was the first time he even got targeted all season. First NFL catch, first NFL touchdown, first anything. This guy wasn't even on the field until week 13. Washington was the 6th round pick this year. It's not a guy who stood out in any way, and I'll just tell you right now, he's going to be kind of target and volume dependent in his new role, basically trying to replace, if he can, Christian Kirk. Not outstanding size or speed. He basically profiles as a slot guy who can make things happen if he's open. Well, he seemed to get open on Monday night. Either that or the Bengals just did not account for him at all because he caught 6 passes for 61 yards and that score. And here's one thing about the Jags, which is why you hadn't seen Washington at all this season. They don't rotate a lot of players. They don't go deep. They're not one of these teams like Kansas City or Washington. They'll throw it and spread it around to like 10 different targets. They've been going all big three, in this case, Kirk, Ridley, Jones when he's healthy. There's really nobody else getting targets outside of the tight end, Evan Ingram. So now that Kirk is completely out, you've got to feel good about Washington's target share. It should be pretty high. There's no way he's going to be a one-to-one replacement for Kirk. But again, if you're in PPR league and you need somebody who can give you a floor, I gotta like Washington's chances. Now, I don't like him this week because he's going to go against Cleveland. In Cleveland, terrible matchup, but also we know that Trevor Lawrence might miss. The following week goes against Baltimore. Not a great spot either, but he might be playable. And again, that also depends a little bit on T-Law. But the last 2 weeks are interesting because he goes against the defenses of Tampa Bay and Carolina. I'll just say if somebody is willing, or maybe they already have, paid up a lot of fab to get Washington, fine, let them. I don't feel like this is a league winner just because he's taking Christian Kirk's place. But if he's just out there on your league's waiver wire, definitely worth picking up. And believe it or not, we didn't have one but 2 late round rookies making their debuts and actually doing something for the first time and looking pretty good, this time for the Cincinnati Bengals. If you didn't watch that game, then you may not know that Chase Brown not only got involved, but early in that game, the very first quarter, he was out touching Joe Mixon as if he was the lead back. He wound up with 9 carries for 61 yards. Pretty solid. Now, at the end of the day, you look at Mixon, you're like, wow, he had a great game. This was vintage Joe Mixon. He got the touchdowns, wound up getting most of the opportunities at running back. That's what you would expect. But again, early on this game, Chase Brown was getting a lot of run and he was looking explosive. So while Mixon is volume dependent, he needs to get those touches to build up that yardage and he needs those goal line opportunities. Brown is the guy who can make some breakaway plays, explosive runs, and doesn't have to get a ton of carries, doesn't have to be even the 1A here. If you don't know who Chase Brown is, he was a 5th round pick out of Illinois. That means he was taking handoffs from Tommy DeVito in college. This is a deep running back that both Chris and I were interested in throughout the offseason if he had the chance. He has 88th percentile speed score, 95th percentile burst score. That's what you like at running back. And if ever given the chance, he can handle the load. He was a workhorse in college. He ran for 1,643 yards on 328 carries his final season. That made him the leading rusher in the Big Ten Conference. This is a conference that's not known for prolific offense necessarily. There's some tough defenses, some low scoring games typically. It's hard to say what Brown's usage will be going forward. We know Mixon's still the guy there as long as he's healthy. But again, you have a guy who now is getting some run even with Mixon on the field, and he's got that breakaway ability. And he now profiles as a very high-end backup. While Cincinnati winning this past week against Jacksonville keeps them alive in the race, you also got to think if they lose and fall out of contention, we might see a lot of Brown in the final 2 weeks of the season. And now I'm going to circle back to a rookie running back I mentioned a few weeks ago. Chris Rodriguez in Washington looked like he might be coming on. He had 7 carries for 31 yards back in week 5, and then he just kind of disappeared. I went a couple games straight with not a single touch. Don't know why, it's still hard to explain. Resurfacing because Brian Robinson did suffer a hamstring injury in week 13. Commanders on bye this week, which is why Rodriguez is purely a stash. Maybe Robinson is out another week. It can be tricky. It could be 2-3 weeks. Who knows? So Rodriguez might actually be in line for his most carries of the season. This past week, solid again, 7 carries, 29 yards. Antonio Gibson just really not doing much outside of being a receiver. So I do feel like if B-Rob misses, Rodriguez will be the lead runner. The real drawback here, if anything, with Rodriguez, besides the fact that he would be playing for a 4-9 team with a lame duck coach, but still, right? Opportunity is everything for running backs. But the schedule after the bye is brutal for Washington. 2 road games against the Rams and then the Jets with their defense, and then the 49ers and the Cowboys. This is why I'm talking about a guy like Rodriguez in this section as a stash, not so much a add on the waiver wire, and definitely consider playing. But now we also have to talk handcuff. So let's look at another running back who is the direct backup and will get all the touches if this running back goes down. And this is a guy we've heard about before. And I know the Josh Kelly thing did not work out early in the season because Eckler missed several games and Kelly was good for 1 game exactly. Really good in 1 game, and that happened to be the game that Eckler had already played in. It was week 1. Kelly was the guy. The next couple of weeks didn't do anything. You were hurting if you started him. So I understand you don't want to give him another shot, and that's fine. You don't have to. But I still will say at this point, he's got upside because he would be the lead runner in that Chargers offense, which needs something. And what they really need the most is some explosiveness at running back because Austin Eckler, since week 1, has not looked like himself. If you have Eckler in fantasy, you already know he's been disappointing, but maybe you don't realize exactly how rough it's been on the ground for him. His only 100-yard rushing effort was the first game of the season, and not only that, but since week 1 and since returning from injury, he hasn't even gotten 70 yards on the ground in a single game. So if you take out that 1 game, which was the first game of the season, ever since then, which also coincides with coming back from injury, he's averaging less than 3 yards per carry, 2.99 to be exact. Now you still have to start Eckler if you have him because he's not just a runner, he's a great pass catcher, touchdown upside, all of that. We've seen him put up fantasy points. But he's just not looking like the same guy. Maybe the Chargers give Kelly a little bit more run. Maybe Eckler gets more breathers down the stretch. Chargers also a team on the precipice of falling out of playoff contention. Also a team with a lame duck coach, most likely. And Eckler headed potentially for free agency. Maybe he doesn't want to risk an injury. I know these are all hypotheticals, whatever. But again, at this point, you got Eckler. You should have Kelly as insurance. Eckler could get hurt again. Eckler could rest. Kelly could get more involved. But the other thing that makes me even more interested is the fact that the Chargers have a great schedule. Over the next 4 weeks, when fantasy playoffs are taking place, they get Denver twice, the Raiders, and the Bills, who are really not a good run defense. So again, I'm not assuming Josh Kelly does anything of significance, but there is a path. And if he's going to do something, this is the time it would happen. And then when I talked waiver wire earlier this week, had to mention the Tank Dell injury and how are they going to replace him? We know Nico's the man there. John Mechie has a path potentially to getting more targets. Noah Brown on the way back here could wind up being a revelation. There could be room for another receiver in this offense to step up now that they need somebody. And that's why I'm going to mention Xavier Hutchinson, another rookie. This is another late round pick, a little bit closer to Nico in terms of build than Tank Dell. Not a little fast guy. He's 6'2", a little bit more of a physical receiver as opposed to a burner. He did not put up huge numbers in college, and that's because he went to Iowa State. This is a team that was 4-8 last year and had average quarterback play. Not a prolific offense by any means. But Hutchinson showed steady improvement every year in college. Now that he might actually get the opportunity, we'll see what he does with it. Of course, the appeal here is he's in the Texans catching passes from CJ Stroud. Right now, Houston, believe it or not, your Houston Texans, have the second most passing yards in the NFL, only behind the Miami Dolphins. Yes, I'm taking a look at Mechie too, and I've talked about Mechie already in this series a few weeks ago. I'm going to look at him maybe first, but I want to actually look at Hutchinson when everyone else is looking one way. I'll look at the other because these guys could be battling for snaps and either one could prevail. If you're battling to make the playoffs or for seeding or your postseason is already started in fantasy, you can't just sit back and wait. You always have to get ahead of the game. Look for these guys on waiver wire. That could help you next week. And of course, you have to make smart start-sit decisions. That's where we help you out. Check out all our videos right here on this week's playlist.